I want to talk about shoes in this exhibition called A Glass Slipper and a Hot Flash. I think shoes appear around 9 times in the exhibition, and I want to walk you through these different spots where you see shoes and talk about the symbol or the image, the subject of shoes, especially how it relates to fairy tales, and also how it relates to my view of the fairy tales and feminism, relationships, kind of present day ideas. So the first pair of shoes you see is right before you walk into the exhibit. There's a small vitrine that has 2 pairs of shoes in it. One is a pair of really quite small women's shoes. They're two-toned. They're almost kind of like ridiculous looking, but super cute. And next to them is a tiny pair of men's shoes. And I have it kind of like enshrined as a symbol before you walk into the exhibit in a kind of like Sleeping Beauty glass coffin type of way, where you're like made very aware that this is a symbol that's going to carry you through the exhibit. That particular use of shoes is kind of bringing up this idea that shoes are maybe about relationships between male and female, maybe they're relationships between oneself and another self, between feminism and traditional values, between past and present. There's all kinds of ideas that could carry you further, but that as kind of like a beginning or introduction to the show is just like this important flavor that I want you to, enter the show with. As you come into the exhibit, if you look low on the left, you'll see 2 record albums. There's an image of the sea, and you see 2 high-heeled shoes kind of collaged onto the front of those. It's called Mermaid Delusions. And there's actually a couple of fairy tales that come up in the show, and you'll see them repeated in different ways. But this one is definitely about the Little Mermaid. The symbol of shoes in that fairy tale is really different because for the mermaid, the shoes symbolize her mobility and her ambition, her sort of heroic journey in getting what she wants, which is kind of interesting. It's very empowering. And in this piece, the image of shoes is kind of interesting. The record albums are these compilations of very schmaltzy romantic music. And I kind of wanted to play out that fantasy a little bit in choosing those record albums. And then the red shoes that are collaged on top of them are really kind of clunky. They're almost actual size. And I kind of fantasized about what would it be like if someone could actually like put on these shoes with these squares of the sea and walk around in them. But they bring up something else too, which is almost like this kind of awkward sense of displacement, which is something that happens in that fairy tale where, the mermaid is taking herself out of her environment, which is the sea, and at great sacrifice to herself is like putting herself in the human environment and trying to get this thing that she wants at a disadvantage because, for one, she doesn't know how to really walk, and she's never worn shoes before, and her movement, too, is just very interesting. In the story, it talks about how everybody would look when the mermaid would move or would dance because it was so graceful and so beautiful. But meanwhile, for the mermaid herself, every single movement was great pain. It was like, she said it was like knives, cutting through her body or walking on knives. That would be what it would be like to walk. So in that second piece, you see kind of a different symbol of shoes for the story. There's a group of 10 unframed large works on paper in the show, and near the top of those, the cluster of those 10 are 2 pieces that relate to the use of shoes in the Cinderella fairy tale. Both use purple. One is on the top left and one is kind of top center. So you'll see kind of wide strokes with purple and some other colors in them. So the one on the left is called Suck It In, and the one on the right is called Bride Shoes. You'll see shoes appear in both of those, and they are bride shoes. And both of those are taken specifically from these folios of paper doll kind of play sets that I found over the past couple years. And these play sets are amazing. They have like the whole lineup of bride and groom, all the clothes, all the people standing up for them. They come in a box, and the illustrations are from like the 1950s and 60s, and they're just incredible, just juicy use of color and mark. I feel like they were really influenced by abstract expressionism. They're so good. So I love that aspect of them. And I always love mixing kind of high and low, forms of art and letting that speak to you. But the image of the glass slipper in the Cinderella story is much different than the mermaid's kind of symbol of shoes. For Cinderella, it works out well for her, but I always felt like the Cinderella story was kind of about everybody else. Like I always related to, the stepsisters or everybody else who didn't fit the shoes. So I feel like the glass slipper is more about femininity in a way that's unattainable. It's fragile. It's sort of perfect. It's really small. It would be really inflexible. So you think about everything about that glass slipper. So that comes into play in kind of the ideas behind Suck It In, which is like definitely alter yourself, check yourself, alter your body. This idea of kind of the impossibility of it all. And then again, you see references in the other piece where there's this fairy tale curtain, kind of theatrical curtain being drawn back, and you see, the rat, you see the clock tower, and those two images, along with the shoes, kind of, foreshadow in the story things like you're running out of time, and that's kind of the piece that relates to menopause. It's sort of lurking in the background. The other two pieces that reference shoes in the 10-piece cluster of unframed works on paper are Wave, Heels, the gray background piece in the center, and then right next to it you see farm animals and high heels. So the gray piece is, again, a mermaid piece. I'm using a compositional kind of choice in that one, which I repeat in a lot of different areas in the show, which is sort of lining up these shapes, whether they're perfume bottles or things on a ledge, with the idea that, you're looking out a window to, a different reality. So you're in a place, but you're looking somewhere else. And what you see in the foreground are the mermaid shoes, which are, really high heels, kind of, again, that idea of impossible comfort and fit. And then you're seeing kind of a background gestural kind of wave, atmospheric. So it's basically about, this and that, about choices against, what you've lost and that looking back, which brings into that piece, about later in life, about like menopause and that idea of looking back on something, on a choice that you made. The other piece, Farm Animals and High Heels, came about in an interesting way. I was looking at these paper doll sets and thinking about how you get a page of things that you can cut out. And so I thought, well, I'll make these shoes and I'll cut them out, make them big. And when I put them on the paper, I just loved how they looked like these polka dots or big stains or spots on the paper. And then I found a little set of farm animals that maybe were used for school or some kind of educational purpose. And I just dropped those in there. And I love the contrast of the high-heeled shoes, the kind of glitz against the farm animal kind of dirt. And that's a pretty familiar fairy tale trope, is like, here's somebody very regular from, little means, being chosen, like that kind of excitement that you get in finding out somebody just like yourself who has no means, who's been chosen for this special purpose. Toward the back of the gallery is a piece called Flashback, and then the word Boobs in parentheses. It's a piece that has a curtain semi in front of it, and it has an empty pair of green high-heeled shoes in front of it. This is a mermaid piece, it has all the ingredients of the story kind of present and in an abstract way, using kind of color and stroke and also the written word or letters to kind of spell something out and give you ingredients of the story. So this one also is about the old wife or the storyteller around the hearth taking these stories and telling them in the way that she wants to tell them with her interpretation. She's manipulating these ingredients. So in the same way, me as an artist, I'm manipulating these stories. And this one about the Little Mermaid has, it's sort of like a flashback at the end of her life. And if you remember about the story, there's, this drama just builds. And I recommend you go to read that story again because it's so good and it's so dramatic. And it's not the Disney version, by the way. It's not a happy ending. It's pretty tragic, actually. But it has elements of the story in color, in stroke, in image, in word. So you see these kind of black circular type of shapes that references the portholes where the Little Mermaid sees the prince through the portholes of the ship for the very first time. You've got a flashback to kind of like the waves of the storm. You've got even a flashback toward the end of her life when she's given a knife from her sisters that she's supposed to plunge in the heart of the prince in order to get her mermaidness back, and she's not able to do it. But when she throws the knife into the sea turns red, and it talks about a sunset type of red that she sees or a sunrise, because it's right at dawn that she sees that color coming in. So that's at the top of the painting. So all these elements are there, and then you also have that inside-outside type of thing. So she's the mermaid who's trying to become a princess. She's in the castle. She's looking out, and she's got these nautical curtains in front of her. So what was her reality is now sort of like, displaced. She's in a different place. The symbol of the shoes in the story is a slightly different. Instead of thinking about, okay, they're her means of empowerment and ambition, now she's sort of ditching the shoes in her action toward the end, where she's saying, I can't kill the prince. He's married somebody else. He's not mine. What a stupid thing I did. And you see these empty shoes kind of waiting in front of the painting, like, as if in a way to enter the painting, but in a way it's her exit out of that story. She's going to die. She's going to turn into sea foam and sort of dissolve and sort of vaporize. So you get the feeling of this kind of presence of the mermaid who's now gone in the empty shoes. There's a pink painting on the wall with the two large paintings, and it's called Pack It Up. It's a Cinderella painting, and it also has shoes in it. The shoes this time are the glass slippers, and they're kind of dancing their way out of the stepmother's house and on the way to the castle. You see elements of the story kind of tumbling around in the picture, but it's definitely like a celebration dance, kind of a sweet revenge painting. And it kind of has allusions to the art world and career. So I think about glass ceiling and the glass slippers and that time where you're sort of breaking through. And that relishing of that moment, or else wondering when it's going to come and who will be the characters in that moment, who will be your special like rat helpers and that type of thing. So it's an interesting painting. It is funny to me, but it was, I think all of us can relate as artists, always trying to get another show, make a connection to a gallery. How many times do you have to apply to New American Paintings before you get in? How many $50 checks do you have to write? But that chance, and then that idea of winning and that celebration and that kind of like, it's happening, I'm moving by everybody is kind of the feeling I wanted to go for in that painting. There's a grouping of movable collages on one wall of the gallery. All the pieces are framed, and they're all put together with eyelets, so that you can actually move them if you can hold them in your hand. You can move the pieces on eyelets back and forth. And sometimes if there's more than one kind of on this chain of one piece is attached to another and to another, you can move something and the whole thing will move. So that idea of being able to manipulate the story, comes in with sort of like the old wives' tale, the old wife telling the story and manipulating it. Anyway, in that grouping of pieces is a piece with green socks, and it's called Sock Curtain. The idea of a barrier between interior and exterior, or between one place and another. It could be in terms of like time of life or perspectives or mind frame, or, looking back, or actually being like physically barred from being a part of. So this idea of curtains opening up, or the socks as curtains opening up to this manor house in England. And all the stories, all the fairy tales are often about people who are oppressed or don't have. They're the have-nots. They're often orphans, or people who've been wronged in some way, and they get their time by some kind of, intervention, or by their own cleverness, or by magical nature intervening. Anyway, the idea that I wanted to get across with Sock Curtain is that it's about feminism as it applies to kind of like a broader worldview, like who are the oppressed and who are the people on one side and the other. And, the fact that it's men's socks kind of cracks it open to, it's not just this idea that, women aren't allowed, or, women are given this position, but it's like there are groups of people all over the world who aren't, are the have-nots, and, what's their position, and when will it happen for them, and that kind of fantasy, and also reality that, it can, or it is happening, or it could be you.